Shalom and welcome to this week's Living Torah. Going to be a little shorter this week. Got a few things that have to be done, some personal issues that Kathy and I have, and so I may give a report on that next week. But for now, just please excuse this if it's a little shorter. That does give you an opportunity, however, to watch a program that I'm back to doing. We had the 100th episode of Life on Purpose. This week last couple of weeks has been myself and Alex Stiles. Well, this week we bring in a guest who ends up going to be a co-host now, and his name is Jared Bain. Jared has been a friend. He's a young guy. He's in his 20s. Very intelligent, interesting testimony of his life. He was raised in a Christian home. He became an agnostic. And when I asked him about that, just to give a little teaser into the program, he said, well, it became easier to believe there was not a God or he was not relevant in my life, because if I actually accepted the fact that there was a God, then I would be responsible to him. And that's what brought him back into his faith, and I've seen so much growth in this young man over the last 2.5 years that I've known him. So Life on Purpose is available. It's on YouTube, it's on Rumble, it's on Vimeo, from our newsletter, various places. So, and if you, and Facebook, and Instagram, by the way. So if you watch it, please do me a favor, click the like button, of course. But not just click the like button. Take a few moments, just 30 seconds, and put a comment in there. These two guys are they're just starting out. This was Jared's actually his first time ever on camera, and he did a great job. But I think it would be just encouraging to both of them if they could see some comments from people. So thank you for that. All right, let's get into this week's Torah portion as we're speeding through the book of Devarim. It's going to be, the end of it's going to be faster than we can ever imagine. And that's the way that it ends up happening. We're on the edge of the festivals here. And I pray that you have already begun to make your preparations for those. In Devarim chapter 11, verse 26, a familiar word, but the one that I have not expounded on for quite some time, and that is the word see. It is translated in King James as behold. It is the word ray. And it is the first time that's used in Scripture is in Genesis chapter 1, verse 4, when the Almighty says, he created the light and he saw that it was good. It wasn't that he just looked at it and went, wow, isn't that pretty? But the word is to perceive, to consider, or good Southern term, to ponder. How much time do we spend these days pondering things? You know, with social media, with the internet, I find myself, you know, we're attached to these things. That is good in a way, is bad in a way, because it does not. We literally have to make a decision to disconnect, even for just a few moments, to consider what's going on in our world around us. The world is given to us in 10-second sound bites, and as soon as you hear one sound bite, there's another one coming along. I was listening to a talk radio program the other day, and they were talking about the hostages. And of course, this piqued my interest. But without even a break, without hardly a breath from the host, the next thing they were doing is, well, you know, how about this football team or whatever sports team they were talking about? And it's like, wait a minute. This transition between the lives of however many people today are being held hostage. Some of those men and women have been there starving, abused, whatever, at the hands of Hamas for going on 2 years now. And then you can just, in one breath, take a total turn and talk about something that's, your local entertainment. I mean, I think that I've been considering over the last couple of months, I think, or maybe just last few weeks, what it was like at the time of Alexander the Great. Now, I know this is ancient history. This is over 2,000 years ago. But Alexander the Great took over the then known world with what? It wasn't with war. It wasn't with weapons. It was with entertainment, with sports, with things that, in a way, actually cause people to disconnect from what life really is. And so this is just a challenge. Ponder. Haggai chapter 1, verses 5 and 7 make this statement, one that I read many, many years ago. I had just been born again, was in a little Nazarene church in Tucson, Arizona. Kathy decided to for birthday or something, I have no idea, she went to a Christian bookstore and said, my husband just got saved, need a couple of books. Well, it was kind of funny now, because the two books that they gave her at a Christian bookstore were number one on the book of Job. What a great place to start. And number two was on the book of Haggai. And I remember reading these words, and they strike me every time that I read them. Consider your ways. What does that mean? That's Ray. That means ponder. I made a statement. I've made this a couple of times in recent speaking engagements I've had, and I did not realize how much of an impact this statement was going to make until I made it and looked at a number of the people who it kind of set them back in their chairs, and it was like, wait a minute, yeah, that's like, I got it, Captain Obvious statement, but it's something I haven't really thought about. And it is this. Here's the statement. Life is a result of our choices. Yeah. That's the Captain Obvious statement. Life is a result of our choices. Now, I understand that there are things that come about in our lives that we could at least make a good argument over. That wasn't my choice. You're driving down the road, you're paying attention, everything is fine, the weather's good, and somebody comes out of the blue and T-bones your car, you're in the hospital. Was that your choice? No. Was that, how do we deal with that kind of a situation? Well, people would say it's bad luck, it's bad karma. As we talked about on Life on Purpose, there's this thing of, well, it's God's fault. Well, maybe it's an act of the enemy. How about, where's the line in the insurance clause? There's one that says acts of God, but I've never seen an insurance policy that has acts of Satan in there. Everybody wants to blame the one that they don't want to believe in the first place when something bad happens. Okay, back to this. But for the most part, you and I are a product of our choices in life. If we find ourselves in a health issue, well, whose choice is this? You find yourself in a financial difficulty. Whose choice was this? Okay, again, there can be exceptions. But for the most part, we are where we are because of the choices that we have made. Which brings us back to that verse in Haggai, consider your ways. Because the only way to get out of a situation is to stop and admit that we have a situation. Now, that's difficult for some people because we live in a society, in a culture that does not want to take responsibility for anything, always trying to blame someone else for mistakes and bad choices that they have made. But when we stop, we consider our ways, we ponder the place that we're at, then we can move on to the second place of change happens through changing choices. Probably many of us have gone through times of finances, or it can be numerous things, and you go back and go, okay, well, the reason I'm here is because of those choices, and I'm going to have to make different choices if I'm going to change things. Here's the problem, is it didn't take, Rome was not built in a day. That's to me is kind of a strange analogy, but nothing is built. There's very few things that are built in a day. Things take time to build. It takes time then to go back and recreate. It takes time. You don't just demolish something. I heard someone years ago that said, well, I know that, serving God may be the right thing, but I just want to spend some time sowing my wild oats. That's kind of a scary thought, that someone would actually have not considered that past, well, I just want to have a good time. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Which is, by the way, if that happens of eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we die, then you have reaped the crop of those wild oats. So how much sowing does a person want to do? And I understand sowing some very bad crops in life, and then expecting that all of a sudden the Almighty is going to step in, there's going to be a major crop failure, and the right crop is going to just spring up out of nowhere overnight. Does he have the ability to do that? Of course. But I don't think it's something that we should ever ask him to do. Why? Because there would be no lesson in that. So change happens when you and I decide to change our choices, which is what is in these verses here of consider life, consider death. That is what the scripture is all about. Consider which way are you going to go. He says, when you come into the land, you are to put the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. Now, I've talked about those two mountains many times. I'll be, God willing, doing that again in October when I have the tour in Israel. But again, which mountain do we want to live on? Which mountain? We want to live on the mountain of blessing, or do we want to live on the mountain of curses? I'm going to get back to that in just a few moments, but going on, in chapter 12, it says, but you are not to, this is verse 4, but you are not to treat Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh the way that you have been instructed to treat other gods. Now, reading back here, it says that when you go into the land, that you are to destroy the gods that are there, the gods of stone and of wood and all these. You're just destroy those, but don't then come to me and treat me the same way. This is, don't treat me the same as you have treated those false gods. We are to honor him, to respect him, and then it says, rather, you are to come to the place where Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh Elohim will put his name. Now, this is a progression. People have asked, well, where did he put his name? I can go to Shiloh, where the tabernacle stood for 369 years. And in the rocks, I have a picture of this actually. In the rocks, it has the Hebrew letters Yud He Vav He in those rocks. And there's been an argument, of course, there's arguments about everything these days. There's an argument about, well, that's where it was supposed to be and never be moved to Jerusalem. Well, I think I can bring out a lot of scriptures going all the way back to Bereshit, to Genesis, that would, make a pretty good argument against that. So when they come into the Promised Land, they go first of all to Gilgal, which is in the area just north of the Dead Sea. This is the area that Yochanan the Immerser was doing the mikvah. This is a place that we see Yeshua going for that mikvah. This is the area of the Essenes. So much of the first chapters of many of the Gospels, specifically Matthew and John, happen right there in that area of Gilgal. This is where the Hebrews came over, a crossing place. So with that, they came and they set up the tabernacle at Gilgal. I can't remember how long it was there, but they eventually moved it to Shiloh, which became the capital. Gilgal was the original capital of Canaan. Then it became Shiloh. And then through the conquest of David, we see that it is moved to, and the temple is eventually built in Jerusalem. So there's a lesson in that to us, is that, once again, things don't happen immediately. I mean, life, this is going to be another one of those Captain Obvious statements. Life takes a lifetime to live. I said to Barry Phillips on Foundations for Life years ago, it's really kind of a fact of life that once you figure it out, you die. Which is rather morbid, but it does give you what the purpose of life is to figure out the purpose of life. And that only comes by considering your ways. And so I wonder, actually, I've been, again, pondering this over the last few months or whatever, probably longer than that. What is, I teach, as you know, a lot on the kingdom, and that's that record groove. Here we go again. And there's this idea that we're going to go through that tribulation period, whether it's 7 years or 1 year, or maybe we make it pretty good if it was 7 days. I don't know. But we're going to go through that transition period, and then everything becomes utopia overnight, or faster than that. Is that really the pattern of Scripture? Is it going to be that we will have some kind of war, some kind of transition? Will we be as it was in the days of Joshua? Will we be driving out the enemies? I don't know. I think I could maybe make an argument both ways. So for that, my desire, just stick around and be a part of it so you can figure out how it's going. But to think that things are just going to automatically in our life go from here to there, when does that normally happen? Somebody wins somebody's wanting financial success. They win the lottery. And what happens? Within years, they're bankrupt. They're into drugs, abuse, all kinds of problems. Why? Because that instantaneous gratitude. Not gratitude. I can't even remember. I told you I'm doing this today. Instantaneous gratification. There you go. I'll get this English language down one of these days. But that is a detriment. Total detriment. When you work for something and you progress towards something, you then appreciate it. This is why I have this issue with things like, to name the names, I guess, Toys for Tots, and these bike drives and whatever, various things that are out there. that you hand, especially children, you set children up for failure. When you give them something with just arbitrary, there's nothing that they have to put into it. I mean, some of you think back to your first bicycle, the one that was given to you. That one, I forgot to lock it up on the front porch one time and came back later on with my mother, and guess what? It's not there. Why? Because somebody had stolen it. Well, the next one I had to work for. And guess what? I took a whole lot better care of it. Anybody that's had a car, at age 16 or 17 or whatever, you got that new car and it had this set of tires on it. What did you do? You went out and tried to burn the rubber off. Well, my first car was a 64 Dodge Dart with a 225 slant 6 push button transmission. It wouldn't burn rubber if you lit them on fire. But I knew many people that, they're everywhere they go is this black mark in the pavement of rubber. Well, guess what? When they had to go buy a set, they started driving a little different. Why? Because we have an investment in it. So one of the things that the Almighty has built into life is that we would be invested in life and therefore appreciate it more. Now this kind of goes in a bit of a transition here. But it says, and this is a verse that has always intrigued me, that Moshe is saying in chapter 12, verse 6, you will not do things the way you do them here today, where everyone does what is, in his own opinion, seems right. Wait a minute, aren't they in the wilderness? Haven't they been in the wilderness for 40 years? Haven't they been, eating manna and drinking from the rock and all of these things, and haven't they been observing the festivals? And well, when we actually read the Torah, well, you had Korah, you had the different uprisings, you had the man that's gathering wood on Shabbat. No, in exile, people were doing then. With the tabernacle in the midst of them, with the fire, the pillar of fire, the pillar of cloud coming down in the midst of the camp, they're still doing what was right in their own eyes. Has anything changed? Absolutely not. What is going to change, I don't know how this is going to happen in that transition to the kingdom, but something that's going to probably be the most difficult thing for the vast majority of people, maybe including myself, is going to be that we're going to have to go from our opinion to his rule. See, somewhere on this side, it is this belief that my opinion matters. And that is why social media exists, so that people can put their opinions. Which, by the way, do those opinions really matter? Well, they are if they're based on truth, but how many opinions have you heard that you're just looking at the person going, how in the world did you come up with something that stupid? Interesting enough, I'm late a day this week on Living Torah, so I'm recording with Barry, and we're going to do a program. This is our plan today on Foundations for Life. Our plan is on the deception, which basically comes to this statement: is there upon planet Earth a spirit of stupid that's been poured out? There's the sign that I have behind me. So getting used to, that transition into the kingdom. How difficult is that transition going to be for each of us? I would like to make that transition easy, which means that my opinion needs to be overcome by his word, by his rule. It doesn't really matter what I think. It matters what he thinks. All right, chapter 13. Talks about this in verse 2, 1 or 2, depending on your translation. If a prophet or someone who gets messages while dreaming arises among you, and he gives you a sign or wonder, and the sign or wonder comes about to be predicted to be let me go back and try that again. And the sign or wonder comes about as he predicted when he said, let's follow other gods, which you have not known, and serve them. There's a reason why the scripture says that signs and wonders are to follow us. These are the words of Yeshua, that signs and wonders will follow you. Signs and wonders are never to lead us. Now, I've been in past years, this is, close to 30 years ago now, I've been in so-called healing crusades. I've been in services that had somebody that, all kinds of crazy stuff. And it's interesting how many people are persuaded by things that they perceive as seeing. I literally was in a meeting, this was in Tucson, Arizona years ago, and this guy was telling people that he was going to make their limbs grow. And he had somebody standing right next to me, pretty close to me, and he had this person stand up, and he put their arms in the air. You can imagine I can't do it all the way up there, but one arm was like this, and one was like this. He said, "See, those two arms, their arms are not the same length." Well, okay. And then you know what he did? He twisted this hand, which meant it went all the way up like this, and all of a sudden, both arms were the same size, and people are gasping. People are crying. People are going crazy because of a trick. See, the thing that should be what we follow, and this was true in Joshua's life. Joshua was told when he entered into the Canaan, you are to follow my words. You're not to turn to the left or to the right. You're to follow all of my commandments. The only thing that we are to follow in this life is his commandments, which, by the way, here's another groove on my record. Those commandments will lead us to the revelation of the Messiah. I was thinking the other day about this idea of what Romans talks about, the veil that is over the eyes of Israel today. And many people have, of course, taught on this. But why is it we would pray that veil would be lifted? Consider, what is the reason? Well, because of, salvation of this people or something. Okay. Well, that may be a good thing, but there are things that are in the Torah that I don't understand because I did not grow up with it. And this is why I hang out with so many. I have so many Jewish friends that I spend time talking to. Because in the end, what I see is though there is a veil, the scripture says there's a veil over their eyes. I think it's in Isaiah. It also says there's a veil over my eyes. The fact is, neither one of us see clearly. We're both kind of standing behind something. As Rav Shaul would talk about, I see through a glass darkly, but kind of a muddy glass, but then face to face. My prayer that veil would be lifted or thinned or whatever, and that my veil is because that will give us a greater revelation of who the Messiah is. And there's nothing on this earth that should be of greater value than for us to have a greater revelation of who he is. So if someone comes along and they are, they have these signs and wonders, but at the same time they're saying, but you don't need to obey those commandments. That stuff's done away with. The scripture says you're to put them to death. Well, it's obvious that that's kind of against the law in our world today. I'm not suggesting by any shape, by any measure that we start putting people to death. But at the same time, so how can I put somebody to death without putting them to death? Well, if I go online and I find somebody that is like on YouTube and they're talking about signs and wonders and the rapture coming and all of these things, but in the end they're telling me, but you don't need to obey the commandments. How do you put them to death? You unsubscribe. When it comes up, you don't listen. You mark on there, hide this, whatever you got to do. You put them to death as far as your life, and you no longer allow them to input into your life. That is the same thing. But they got a word. I heard they have a word about when the end is going to be, and this stuff that happens. So all of a sudden I've got to listen to them because they're telling me something that's going to happen, and but then in the end they're not leading you into the commandments, which is going to bring forth life no matter what happens. Okay? Now, lastly, we get this word in chapter 13, chapter 14, and it says, because you are a people, this is verse 2, set apart as holy for Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh your Elohim. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh your Elohim will choose you to be his own unique treasure out of all the peoples on the face of the earth. Now this verse here is through Scripture. This verse goes back to Exodus, also goes to the writings of Kepha, to Peter. Of you are to be, and it's kind of funny, in a way that King James translates it, a peculiar people, and my offhanded joke is this, that some have taken that to a bit of an extreme. I mean, have you met those folks? As Eddie Chumney once said at a conference I was with him, he says this Hebrew roots movement, it normally attracts two different kinds of people. Number one, truth seekers. Number two, freak shows. Thank you, Eddie Chumney, for speaking truth. I've been around a number of those freak shows, and they can be kind of hard to get away from at times. So we're not to be a peculiar people. Now, the world may see us as peculiar. All right, if someone sees that you're wearing your tzitzit, they're like, that's peculiar. Somebody comes to your door and sees a mezuzah, that's peculiar. To them it is. To us it's normal. Okay? Because they're seeing the world upside down. They're seeing it from a different perspective, so a perspective of righteousness is to them peculiar. The very fact that I have service on Shabbat, that I believe that Shabbat is from Friday night to Saturday night, there are numerous people. I might be out playing golf with some guys on Sunday morning, and they still don't quite figure out, because I'm not in church on Sunday morning, really is an interesting thing, because they don't see me as, I don't really know what they see me as half the time, But if you don't go to religious activities during the prescribed religious activities time, then somehow you're seen as peculiar when you can point to verses and say, this is why I'm doing this. But it doesn't matter what the verses say, because you're outside of the norm of our socially prescribed religious activities. I mean, who's peculiar here, really? Okay, but the word is unique. It is in Hebrew, segulah. It is, this would be in English, it would be written out S-G-U-L-L-A, segulah. And it is a samech, a gimel, a lamed, and a hay. This is a fascinating word that actually goes back to the first part of this Torah portion of choosing life. Okay, we are to be a segulah, a unique treasure unto him, a unique people unto him. And the samech, the letter samech is kind of like a circle, and so it speaks about surrounded. Let's take for a moment the idea of a group of sheep in a pen, or a group of sheep that's in a pasture that is surrounded by a fence. So this is about a people that are surrounded. Number two, the second is gimel, which is about our walk. If you look at the Hebrew aleph beit, it is about it looks like a person that's walking out of the house. Okay, so this is a person walking. The next is lamed, which is the letter of the shepherd's staff, or the letter of the king. It's the center letter of Malach, the word for king. And then the last letter, Hay, which is his breath, or better translated, I believe, the picture here is his breath, his authority, his living word that came forth from his mouth, which, by the way, is the Torah. By the way, goes back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 4. He saw the light, ha et or. The aleph tav is in there, which has the numeric value, ha et or, of 613, which is the commandments. He perceived that it was good. Why? Because that light was about the Messiah that would be brought into the world to give forth light. So this word, we are to be a peculiar or a unique treasure unto him. It is the picture of a people. Let's go with sheep that are within an enclosure, protected, but they are moving. That enclosure is like a shepherd that's moving his sheep from one pasture to another pasture to another pasture with a goal in mind. And those sheep are walking with that shepherd toward the shepherd's staff, toward the king, the lamed, and are embracing his breath and authority. Interesting enough, the word kahal, which is the word that would be translated congregation or assembly. We use that word with Life Assembly here, wrongly translated in Greek to ekklesia, wrongly translated into German as Kirk, wrongly translated into English as church. The word kahal is similar in a couple of the letters here. So this is about a pasture, a group of sheep walking toward the breath and authority of the king. And when we do that, guess what? We look unique in his eyes and peculiar in the world's eyes. But in the end, do you really care? Do you really care if you're peculiar in the eyes of the world, as long as you look unique in his world, in his life, in his eyes? All right. Well, I said a little shorter, about 10 minutes is all. So, again, I'll come back to maybe the reasons next week, but not this week. Appreciate your prayers, your support for this ministry, your support for Israel. For we are, of course, planning the Connect Israel tour actually 60 days from now. And so if you'd like to send in that Sukkot offering, I'd be glad to take that with me as I go on the tour. It'll be a blessing to many. Remember to pray for the shalom of Yerushalayim, to pray over those that are fighting right now. There are many reservists that are being called up into duty once again. The people of Israel are battle weary in many ways, but when you put them in the battle, somehow that weariness goes away, and they fight with purpose. And may they fight this time regarding Gaza City with purpose, and that purpose is for victory, not appeasement. All right. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Have a blessed, prosperous week. Bezrat Hashem, God willing. See you again next week. Until then, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.